Hi guys, as promised I am back for a video that I've kind of never really done before. Anyone who watched my last video will know that I said I discovered a Grail. And this video is going to be solely about that single album. Now, first off, I think the term Grail gets used an awful lot. And for the most part, I would think it gets overused. There are, I would say, a lot of things that get deemed a Grail, which I would not necessarily say that they were. I've probably done it, probably guilty of it, but there's no denying that this album that I have is a bona fide Grail. Much in the way that Jonas found that copy of that original copy of the July album. I think that's fair to say that that is a Grail. Something that you could never really justify spending the kind of money you would need to buy a copy. And I know people have different levels of wealth and ability to buy things, but an album that is $100 or $200 is not really unobtainable. But when you start stretching into four figures for an album, and the rarity of that album already being slim, I think the title Grail is wholly justified. So the album that I've found, or that has come into my possession, is this. This is the, well, I will say the one and only, but they have actually released another album subsequently. An original pressing of Caedmon's self-titled debut album. Now, these guys were a group of Edinburgh veterinary students that formed a band in the early 70s. Doing kind of, I suppose, what would be termed acid folk, but it's not really that acid. It's you could pick any of those kind of weird folk, acid folk, psychedelic folk, Christian folk. There's quite a lot of religious and, in fact, connotations on this. In fact, the whole bit of blurb at the end here is quite religiously orientated. They're not as psychedelic as, say, the Incredible String Band. Think maybe Fairport, but I wouldn't hesitate to say this is probably better than anything Fairport Convention did. Now, interestingly, this album was produced at the very end of the band's existence. They had been playing gigs around the UK, mainly around Scotland, for I think about 5 or 6 years. And then in '78 they decided to disband, but as a kind of swan song, they thought they would record an album and release it. So they recorded this in, well, it's basically their flat, with home recording equipment, self-financed, privately pressed. If you look on some websites, they some people have suggested there was only 100 copies of this, but I think there was 500 copies of this pressed originally. Now, they made a slight error when they recorded the album, in as much as the tracks that they recorded were longer than they could squeeze onto an LP, which meant they had to put 2 of the extra tracks on this 7-inch single that they put in the sleeve with it. So this is a great find. Now, on its own, I would say this album goes for about £1,000. So what's that? $1,400. With the single and the insert and everything, it can go up to $1,500. So what's that? $2,300 or something, which is ludicrous amount of money. But it shows you how good this album is. All the artwork and everything was done by the band members. It's got this lovely kind of gold sleeve. You can see how hand drawn it's been. There's a few dinks and creases on this, but I'm certainly not going to complain. Now, I've seen this album. You can search on websites like PopPsych, which is a good one, and it keeps track of selling prices. Here's the insert. Now, I've seen this for sale, which is where I've got the prices from. So, like I said, without the single and with the insert, it's about £1,000. With the single, it bumps up to about 1,500, or thereabouts. But this also has one thing which I've never seen before. Now, this album was made and sold at their farewell gig. So obviously you had to buy tickets for the gig. Now, this one also had this, which I believe is a ticket for that gig, in the sleeve of it. You can see there the entry price of 50p. Now, I've never seen one of these before, so I don't know whether the person who attended the gig had bought a few tickets, and then somebody was a no-show, so they've slipped one in the sleeve just as a kind of keepsake. But I've never ever seen one of these on any of the websites that this album is mentioned. You can see it's hand numbered on the back there. So this is a really cool little artifact. So if anyone out there is watching this and can tell me what this is, it would be great to know. The other thing, which I don't know is significant or not, but within the sleeve I found this as well, which is a kind of pressed flower. Now, I don't know whether this is accidentally in there, but I've taken it out and put it in this little bag just to keep it safe, just in case it has some kind of significance. It's possibly a flower that they had on the set, I don't know. But I thought I'd keep it just for the sake of it. Now, the record itself was in this lovely kind of... It's kind of strange in a sleeve. I've never seen one like this before. Made in England on the bottom. It's kind of a thick paper, but the paper almost feels like it has a kind of waxy. It's not poly-lined, but it feels like it's got a waxy kind of surface on the inside. Now, there we go. Here's the sleeve. You can see how hand done everything is. I think the various members of the band did various bits of artwork. So we go side 1, 1978. Yeah, so like I said, the they'd recorded too many songs to fit on the album, so they took 2 of the songs off and put them on the single. But I think the reissues of this have it all on one piece of vinyl. So yeah, I'm kind of speechless with this whole thing. This is the kind of thing that I think, as much as I'm tempted to sell it, because the cash injection would be useful, I think it's one of those things that I know I will never ever be able to get again. So I'm going to keep hold of it. I'm going to look after it until the time comes. Like I always said, I could sell this one album for a ton of money, or I could sell 100 albums, and I think I'd prefer to sell the 100 albums and keep hold of this one, part of the thinning down process. So yeah, so there we go. Now, I did think about editing this video and putting in lots of kind of cool clips of the music, but to be honest, my editing skills are horrendous. Or not horrendous, they're non-existent. But you can find a lot of the songs of this on YouTube. Right here on YouTube. So I would suggest you go and check them out. Sea Song is probably the one that stands out to me. But that'll possibly change. It's one of those albums that quite a varied song style. So yeah, the debut album by Caedmon. Unbelievable score. My new best record by a long shot. I thought that Aardvark one I found earlier in the year was good, but this has basically blown everything else in my collection out of the water. A proper Grail, and one of the rarest psychedelic acid progressive folk albums, whatever you want to describe it as, that you can get in the UK. Date wise, it sounds like it should probably be from the late 60s, from 68, 69, you know, the same kind of time as a lot of Fairport and things came out, but it didn't come out till 78, which is why it was probably overlooked a lot of the time. It maybe wasn't cool anymore, and it's the fact that it was privately pressed and sold at their farewell gig just kind of adds to its mystique. I feel like I'm rambling a bit now, so I'm probably going to cut this short. It's coming up for 15 minutes on one album. So yeah, I'd love to hear your comments on this. If anyone else has heard it, has a copy of it, yeah, so take care, and see you all soon.